The fish in Inching always tasted like rust. It was a fitting flavor for this place, the most remote satellite city in the Federation. To the rest of the world, Inching was just a discarded, rusted gear left to rot in the wilderness by some giant. High above the city, massive holographic projections flickered to life. They were broadcasting the awakening ceremony from the capital's main plaza. I watched the screen as the chosen ones paraded in magnificent platinum robes, bathed in holy light. Every successful awakening was met with fireworks and hymns. Down here on the playground of Inching 3rd Preparatory High School, there were no hymns. There was only mud and cold rain. Next, Class 3, Grade 2. Liyabai. The instructor's voice was cold, sounding more like he was reading an obituary than a name. Rain dripped from his black-brimmed hat, splashing onto the list in his hand and blurring my name. I stepped out from the back of the crowd. My school uniform was washed out and ill-fitting, the cuffs splattered with mud. I was thin, my black hair matted against my forehead by the rain, shielding my eyes. The noisy crowd went silent for a heartbeat as I came forward. Then, the whispers started, thick and biting. Is that the Lee family's son-in-law? Should keep it down. Even if he's just a son-in-law, he still carries that name. To think he ended up in a hellhole like Inching. Doesn't matter what his name is. I heard he came in dead last during the physical exams. He's going to be a loser today, too. A fallen noble's son is lower than a dog. I heard the mockery and the poorly hidden joy in their voices. I didn't care. I didn't show anger, and I didn't even look up. 18 years in this world had taught me how to hide my claws. In a world that eats people alive, the anger of the weak is the cheapest emotion there is. Subconsciously, I glanced toward the front of the girls' line. Gu Hanqing stood there. Even in a baggy, oversized school uniform, she possessed a cold, solitary elegance. She was like a snow lotus blooming in a ruin. She was the jewel of the Gu family from the capital. She shouldn't have been in the mud of a low-class city like this. 3 years ago, she had insisted on transferring to this broken high school. Her official excuse was that the air in Inching was better. Only I knew the truth. She came here to be with me, the family exile, the failure. She must have felt my gaze. She turned her head, her eyes usually as cold as ice, but now they were filled with worry. Her lips moved slightly, silently mouthing 4 words. Asterisk, don't fear. I'm here. The corner of my mouth twitched in a ghost of a smile. I looked away and walked up the black awakening platform. Put your hand on it, the instructor urged impatiently. He looked at me like I was a piece of scrap metal ready for the bin. I took a deep breath and pressed my cold palm against the pitch-black obelisk. The moment I touched it, a piercing chill seeped into my marrow. I closed my eyes. I didn't ask for S-class. I didn't even want A-class. Those were scripts written for people like Gu Hanqing. For an outcast like me, I just needed enough power to survive this swamp. Even C-class would do. The obelisk vibrated. Everyone held their breath. But the expected pillar of light never appeared. At the very bottom of the stone, below the line that marked unrecyclable trash, a dim red glow flickered. It was a flame, no bigger than a fingernail. It wavered unsteadily, looking like the rain would snuff it out at any second. The instructor stared, then let out a derisive snort. He scribbled heavily on his electronic tablet. D-class. Lower tier, elemental. Faint flame. As the verdict fell, the crowd erupted in laughter. Ha! A faint flame? Is that for lighting cigarettes? I told you. Doesn't matter whose blood he has. A failure is a failure. D-class. He's got the life of a miner ahead of him. What a waste. Gu Hanqing actually stayed in Inching for 3 years for a guy like that. The laughter hit me like a tide. I stood on the stage, looking down at the tiny spark in my palm. My face remained calm. It was so calm it was almost eerie. D-class. Disposable material. Fuel. That was the label the world had given me. Get down. The instructor waved me off like a fly. Don't block the way for the others. I didn't say a word. I turned to walk down the steps. Just then, everything changed. Gu Hanqing, you're up. At the instructor's shout, Gu Hanqing walked toward the platform. As she passed me, she paused. She reached out to grab my sleeve, but I stepped aside, avoiding her touch. A flash of hurt crossed her eyes, but it quickly turned into resolve. She stepped up to the obelisk and slammed her slender palm down. Boom. There was no build-up. A blinding pillar of ice blue light instantly pierced the heavens. Crack, crack, crack. Terrifying cold exploded from the obelisk. The puddles on the playground froze in a millisecond. The falling rain turned into sharp shards of ice, suspended in midair. The temperature in the entire school plummeted 30 degrees. The students who had been laughing at me were now shivering in terror, staring at the girl on stage who looked like an ice queen. The instructor's electronic pen literally exploded in his hand. S class, he screamed, his voice cracking. Mutant elemental. The twin frost of the East. The scene turned into madness. The recruiters from the elite universities, who had been dozing off on the VIP stand, suddenly acted like sharks smelling blood. They scrambled down the stairs. University of the Capital. Student Gu, we need you. I'm from the military. We'll grant you the rank of second lieutenant immediately. Notify the Gu family. The eldest miss has awakened in S class. The crowd was boiling. This was the truth of the world. D class was a joke to be mocked, and S class was a miracle to be worshipped. Several luxury floating cars bearing the Gu family crest tore through the rain and landed in the center of the playground. It was a guard detail they had prepared long ago. Black-clad bodyguards swarmed out, forming a circle around Gu Hanqing to shut everyone else out. Eldest miss, the lead guard said, his voice respectful but firm. The head of the family has ordered that once you awaken S class, you must return to the capital immediately. I'm not going, Gu Hanqing said. Frost swirled around her. She pushed past the guards, her eyes locked onto my thin figure standing in the corner of the crowd. I'm taking him with me. The lead guard followed her gaze and saw me holding a tattered umbrella, preparing to leave. His electronic eye scanned me instantly. Target, Li Yabai. Level low. Threat, 0. Value, negative. Eldest miss, the guard's voice turned cold. Dragons do not live with snakes. He is in exile, and now, he is a useless failure. Taking him will only be a stain on your reputation. I said, I'm taking him. Gu Hanqing's voice carried a hint of killing intent. Her S-class pressure caused the ground beneath her to crack. Just as the standoff reached its peak, I spoke up. That's enough, Gu Hanqing. I turned around. Across the wall of guards that I could never cross, I looked at the girl who was willing to fight her family for me. I smiled. It was a sharp, mocking smile, the kind of look I'd give a vendor when haggling over pennies at the market. Stop messing around, Miss Gu. You heard the man. I'm D-class, and you're S-class. We're not even the same species anymore. How are we supposed to play together? Li Yabai, you know I don't care about our ranks, Gu Hanqing said, her eyes turning red. But I do. I interrupted her. I shrugged and pointed at my soaked, cheap clothes. You're going to the capital to be a queen. I'm going to the mines to dig coal. We have different paths now. Don't feel bad for me. You've shielded me from a lot of trouble these past 3 years. Consider us even. I paused. For a split second, a flicker of tenderness crossed my eyes, but I buried it instantly under a layer of cold indifference. Just go, I said. When you're rich and famous, don't forget your childhood friend. Just lend me some money then. After all, I'm pretty broke. I didn't give her a chance to respond. I turned around, gripped my broken black umbrella, and walked straight into the heavy rain. Li Yabai. Her heart-wrenching cry echoed behind me, but it was quickly drowned out by the roar of the hovering car's engines. She was an S-class prodigy, destined for the clouds. I was just a D-class failure belonging to the mud. Half an hour later, I reached the slums. I ducked into a deserted, dead-end alley and leaned against a mossy wall. Rainwater slid down my cheeks. I couldn't tell if it was just the rain or something else. I slowly raised my right hand. D-class, a tiny flame. I whispered. I activated my talent again. That thumb-sized orange spark flickered into existence. The rain hit it with a sizzle, but strangely, the water couldn't put it out. My expression shifted. The act I'd put on, the cowardice and the fake smile, faded away like a receding tide. In its place was a deep, bottomless darkness and a hint of madness. Only I could see what was really happening. I lived in the 4th district of Silver City, the lower city. This place was the city's colon. There were no holograms or climate-controlled zones here. It was just a cluster of decaying apartment blocks packed together like tumors, with gutters that ran constantly with multicolored filth. I expertly avoided the dead rats and puddles of vomit as I ducked into a gray, peeling building. There was no elevator. The motion sensor lights had been broken for 3 years. The only light came from the occasional neon searchlight sweeping past the windows. My home was the attic on the top floor. It was my only asset and my coffin. I pulled out my key and twisted it in the rusty lock. The door groaned in a high-pitched protest. The room was tiny, barely 15 square meters. I had a wooden bed with a brick propping up one broken leg, a folding table covered in tape, and a flimsy wardrobe shaking in the corner. The air smelled like uncurable dampness and cheap, synthetic nutritional supplements. I tossed my bag on the bed, too tired to even dry my hair. I pulled a tin biscuit box from under the bed. This was my treasury. I opened the lid, and the contents were pathetic. I had 152 federal credits, 50 of which were in coins. For supplies, I had 2 expired, strawberry-flavored nutrient shots. They tasted like garbage. For a weapon, I had a notched high-carbon steel dagger I'd salvaged from a junkyard. That was it. I did a quick count and laughed at myself. 3 years ago, when the Lee family from the capital dumped me in Silver City, they gave me this attic and a bank card with a 500-credit monthly allowance. To a giant like the Lee family, who controlled the Federation's energy lifelines, that money wasn't even enough to feed a dog. But it was their final mercy to a stain on their bloodline. 6 months ago, the card stopped working. No notice. No explanation. It was like throwing away a bag of trash. You don't go back to check if the trash is still there. I had hoped to awaken a C-class talent, so I could at least work as a security guard for a big company. But I got AD. I sat in the dark, my fingers tracing the cold handle of my dagger. If I didn't find a way to fight, I wouldn't even be able to afford this leaky attic next month. I sighed and opened my left palm. Since it's D-class, let's see just how useless this weak flame really is, I muttered. Maybe I can use it to cook noodles or save on the electric bill. I focused my mind. A small orange flame danced in my palm. It was weak, unable to push back the shadows even half a meter away. It burned quietly, like the breath of a dying man. I stared at it for a long time. Suddenly, I frowned. Something was wrong. The flame had no temperature. I moved my finger through the center of the fire and felt nothing. No burn, no heat. Instead, I felt a tremor deep within my soul. As I watched, the harmless flame split open like an eye. A tiny, black gold crack appeared in the center. There was no system notification, no flashy lights. My vision simply went black. It felt like someone had grabbed me by the collar and yanked me into a bottomless whirlpool. When my vision cleared, I was sitting in a cold, hard high-back chair. I wasn't in my attic anymore. Gray mist swirled around me, and beneath my feet was a void as dark as a mirror. In front of me sat a massive bronze table that took my breath away. On either side of the table were 7 giant, empty chairs. Each backrest was carved with ancient, gray totems. A judge holding scales, a giant carrying lightning, a reaper wrapped in thorns. It was grand, ancient, and deathly silent. I tried to stand up, but I realized my perspective had changed. I was looking down from a great height. I looked at my hands. They weren't the rough hands of a laborer anymore. They were made of black gold mist, pulsing with the power of universal laws. I was sitting at the head of the long table, the seat of honor. Fragments of information flooded my brain like instinct, revealing the truth. Talent name, the wisdom of dusk. True form, incarnation of the gods. Rank, SSS. Sequence, supreme. Current status, 1 seat available. Innate ability, you are wisdom. You can split your soul to create subordinates with independent personalities and talents. My pupils contracted. It wasn't D-class. It wasn't trash. This was an SSS class talent that stood above all rules. It was a forbidden power that could allow one man to become an entire army, an entire nation. I started to laugh. The sound was low at first, then it became wild, almost manic. I laughed at the blind awakening stone. I laughed at the Lee family for throwing me away like garbage. I laughed at myself for thinking I'd have to settle for digging coal. So that's how it is, I whispered, slamming my hand onto the bronze armrest. My eyes burned with pure ambition. Since you don't want me, and since this world won't give me a way to live, I'll build my own path. I looked at the first seat to my left. The backrest was carved with a broken sword that radiated a terrifying, murderous intent. Seat code, slaughter. Required materials, absolute killing intent, and 10% of the host's soul strength. Only 10%. I narrowed my eyes, a ruthless light flickering in them. I'd give half my soul if I had to. Reality is too cruel, and my body is too weak. I need power now. I only had a mortal tier physique. In a city like Incheon, crawling with beasts and thugs, I wouldn't last 3 days. I needed a blade. I needed a weapon to break my chains and seize the resources I required to survive. Do it, I growled. The pain hit me instantly. It was indescribable. It felt like someone was using a dull saw to slowly cut through my brain. I curled into a ball on the gray mist throne, my body shaking violently. The black and gold mist around me trembled with my agony. I didn't make a sound. I couldn't. I just kept my eyes locked on that empty seat. It had to work. It had to. With a final, agonizing wrench of my will, a piece of my soul was torn away. A ball of pure soul energy flew toward the bronze chair of slaughter. The mist boiled. The sound of clashing metal filled the air. A figure slowly began to take shape on that massive throne. I snapped my eyes open. I was back in my narrow bed in the attic, gasping for air. I was drenched in cold sweat. My head felt like it had been hit by a sledgehammer, ringing with a dull, throbbing ache. I was back in reality. The attic was still cramped and smelled of mold, but I didn't care about the sweat or the stench. I stared at the corner of the room. A boy was standing there. He looked about 17 or 18, lean and pale. He wore a black hoodie pulled low, hiding most of his face and leaving only a glimpse of a sharp chin. But the most striking thing was the long bundle on his back. It was a rusty piece of scrap metal I'd bought for $20 at a junkyard to protect myself. But on his back, that scrap metal radiated a chill that made my skin crawl. He slowly raised his head. His eyes were pitch black, devoid of any emotion. He looked like a precision-killing machine. The moment our eyes met, I felt it, a deep, blood-linked connection. I was the brain, and he was my hands and feet. A golden data panel hovered over his head. Codename, 7 kills. Name, Lin Chi. Identity, First Counselor of the Dusk Assembly. Rank, Tier 1 Early Stage. Talent, S-Class Gung Gold Sword Mastery. There was a note at the bottom. Under the influence of his talent, that rusty iron bar was now as sharp as a high-tech alloy blade. It worked. It actually worked. I had an S-Class warrior who obeyed my every whim. The joy inside me felt like a volcano about to erupt. I reached out a trembling hand to touch him, just to make sure he wasn't a hallucination. Lin Chi didn't move. He just stood there, steady and sharp as a blade in its sheath. With him, I finally had the capital to climb out of this gutter. I dragged myself out of bed. The soul split left me with a splitting headache, but my mind was racing with adrenaline. I walked to my desk, grabbed the only dagger I had left, and tossed it to Lin Chi. "Take it," I said. He caught it effortlessly. In that instant, I saw a faint golden glow flow from his fingers into the blade. The chipped edge let out a clear, sharp ring as a cold light flickered across the steel. S-Class talents were truly terrifying. I looked out the window at the rainy night and the distant neon lights of the city. My stomach growled like thunder. Splitting my soul had burned through all my energy, and I had no money for food. Those 2 expired nutrition fluids wouldn't be enough for both of us. "Lin Chi," I said, my voice low and cold. The boy in the hoodie tilted his head, waiting for his orders. "We're out of food." I pointed to the dark, chaotic streets of the lower district. "Go out there. Find the people who used to bully us. Find the rats trading in the back alleys. They have plenty of extra cash. Go bring back our first bucket of gold." He didn't say a word. He just nodded. The window slid open silently, and he vanished into the rain like a ghost. I sat back in my chair, listening to the rain. A slow, dark smile spread across my face. The Leaf family, the Goof family, the game was just beginning. Outside, thunder rolled. I opened a bottle of expired strawberry nutrition fluid. It tasted like chemicals and chalk, but I forced it down. It was my only source of energy. "Connect," I whispered. I closed my eyes and knocked on the gates of the gray mist in my mind. The world shifted. It was a strange sensation, like wearing a VR headset with 100% sensory feedback, but I could mute the pain while keeping the sight and sound. I was seeing through Lin Chi's eyes now. Location: Black Snake Alley, 4th District. The rain was heavy, drumming against Lin Chi's black hoodie. But through his eyes, the world was different. Metallic elements in the air, rusty pipes, and even discarded soda cans glowed with a faint white light. It was the resonance of his gung-gold energy. Lin Chi moved like a phantom, his bare feet making no sound in the puddles. The rusty bar on his back was wet, but it hummed with hidden power. There, I commanded through our mental link. He stopped and looked toward a rain shed at the end of the alley. A few thugs were huddled there, smoking. They had black snake tattoos on their arms, members of the Black Snake Gang. Before I awakened, these bastards forced me to pay 50 federal credits in protection money every month. Damn this weather, one yellow-haired thug muttered, spitting out a cigarette. Why do we have to move tonight? Li Yabai is just a useless dog. Now that Gu Hanqing is gone, he's just meat on a cutting board. We could have waited until tomorrow. A fat guy sharpening a machete sneered. That's why we have to move now. I heard that even though the Li family threw him out, he might still have some treasures Gu Hanqing left him. If we wait, someone else will grab them. They laughed, a disgusting, greasy sound. They thought they were going to have a big payday. Back in the attic, I heard every word. A cold fire burned in my chest. They wanted to hunt me? They had no idea who was really the predator tonight. A cold smile tugged at the corner of my mouth. So, they were coming for me. I sat in my dark attic, slowly swirling the empty nutrient solution tube in my hand. My eyes were as cold as ice. If they wanted to deliver themselves to my doorstep, I wasn't going to let them leave. Lin Chi, I whispered through our mental link. Clear the area. You are authorized to use 30% power. Back in the alley, under the rain shed, the yellow-haired thug started to stand up to take a leak. Suddenly, he felt a sharp chill on the back of his neck. Who's there? He barked, spinning around. Out of nowhere, a figure stood in the darkness just outside the shed. It was a young man shrouded in a black hoodie. His head was down, face hidden, but his hands were busy unwrapping a long, cloth-covered object. Where'd this brat come from? Yellow Hair sneered. He didn't take the skinny kid seriously at all. The Black Snake Gang is working here. Scram. He reached for the switchblade at his waist. But in the next heartbeat, a sound cut through the heavy thunder, a crisp, metallic ring that vibrated through the air. A flash of blinding gold light streaked across Yellow Hair's vision. It was too fast for his eyes to follow. He had only pulled his blade halfway out when it snapped into two perfect pieces, the edges as smooth as glass. Then, his world began to spin. As he tumbled through the air, he saw a familiar, headless body gushing blood, slowly collapsing into the mud. That's me, was his last thought. His head hit the ground with a wet thud. It wasn't until warm blood splashed onto their faces that the other three thugs realized what had happened. Murder. He killed him. The fat guy screamed, desperately raising his machete. He never got the chance to swing. Lin Chi moved. In the attic, I narrowed my eyes, mesmerized by the view through his senses. It was beautiful. This was the violent aesthetic of an S-rank talent, the gung-gold sword chi. The rusty iron bar in Lin Chi's hand had transformed. Wrapped in a pale gold current, the rough metal looked like a divine lightsaber from a myth. Lin Chi moved like lightning, his feet splashing through the puddles like blooming lotus flowers. Slash, slash, slash. 3 afterimages flickered in the rain. Raindrops were sliced clean in half. Machetes snapped like paper. The weak protective energy around the thugs' bodies was shredded instantly. There were no screams. Only the dull thud of bodies hitting the ground. All 3 thugs collapsed into the blood-stained water, clutching their throats. Their windpipes had been opened by a microscopic, precise cut. The heat of the gung-gold energy had vaporized the blood instantly. Not a single drop landed on Lin Chi. From drawing this sword to sheathing it, only 1.5 seconds had passed. The rain kept falling. Lin Chi stood silently among the corpses, the iron bar pointed at the ground. The dazzling gold light faded, and the weapon returned to its state as a piece of junk metal. I let out a long breath back in my room. The thrill of controlling life and death made my heart, a heart that had been silent for 18 years, thump violently against my ribs. But I calmed down quickly. Search them, I commanded. Lin Shi crouched down like a cold, efficient machine. He went through their pockets with professional speed and zero mercy. He pulled out crumpled federal credits, a few low-grade beast cores, and even ripped a gold necklace off the fat guy's neck. A minute later, Lin Shi stuffed the loot into his pockets. He pulled out a bottle of cheap deodorizing powder, something I'd originally bought to hide the smell of mold in the attic, and scattered it over the scene. The heavy rain would wash away the rest of the evidence. A dark shadow blurred, and he vanished into the end of the alley. 10 minutes later, my attic window creaked open. A soaking wet Lin Shi hopped inside and shut the window, locking out the storm. He walked to the table and dumped a pile of bloody cash and dusty beast cores onto the wood. I stood up, my eyes shining at this first pot of gold. I started counting. 3,200 federal credits. 3 defective tier, 1 beast cores, worth about 500 each. 1 gold necklace, valued around 2,000. Total, 6,700 federal credits. My hands trembled slightly. To the old me, this was a fortune. It was enough for a year's rent or 10 bottles of decent nutrient solution. But more importantly, I hadn't begged for this. This wasn't charity. It was plunder. So, this is what power tastes like. I picked up a beast core, looking at the cloudy energy inside through the dim light. I turned to Lin Shi, who was silently wiping the rust on his iron bar in the shadows. "Good job, Chisha," I said. I pulled a single bill from the pile and lit it with a match. I watched it turn to ash at my fingertips, the flame reflecting in my eyes, half in light, half in shadow. With money, I could buy medicine. I could cultivate. If the Black Snake Gang wanted to target me, then these thugs were just the beginning. Since they're looking for me, I muttered, my voice dropping to a dangerous growl, I might as well turn them into our personal ATM. Outside, thunder crashed again. That night, a ghost was born in Silver City, and I took my first real step on the path to becoming a god. The rain eventually stopped, but the air stayed thick and humid, like it was about to drip. It was 2 a.m. I sat on my broken chair, a hand-drawn map of Silver City's underground spread out before me. I chewed on a piece of moldy bread, washing it down with cold water. That was for my physical body, but on the other side of my consciousness, the scene was much louder. The entrance to the abandoned subway station in the West District was the gateway to the ghost market. By day, it was a breeding ground for beggars and mutant rats. By night, it was the city's largest hub for fenced goods and contraband. Lin Shi stood at the entrance. To hide his face, I had spent 5 credits on a plain white porcelain mask. With his black hoodie and the cloth-wrapped object on his back, he radiated a chilling, don't touch me vibe. Entry fee is 200. 2 burly guards grunted, blocking the path. They were Awakeners, tier 1 muscle types. To a normal person, they were an immovable wall. Lin Shi didn't say a word. He pulled out 2 crumpled bills he'd taken off the thugs and handed them over. The guards squinted at the masked kid, sensing a faint smell of blood on him, but they didn't ask questions. They waved him through. The ghost market was a world of its own. The abandoned platforms were lined with stalls under buzzing, yellow emergency lights. People were selling expired weapons, low-tier monster parts, and even organs of unknown origin. It was a place of chaos, a blind spot for the law. I steered Lin Shi through the crowd, my mind clear. My goals were simple: get cash, get gear, and buy a new identity. He walked straight toward a corner shop with a sign that read, Old Jin's General Store. This was a place even the Black Snake Gang feared. The owner was a retired veteran with official ties, and his reputation for honesty was decent enough for this hellhole. The door opened, hitting us with a wave of thick, cheap tobacco smoke. Behind the counter, a one-eyed old man was tinkering with a disassembled pistol. He didn't even look up. Buying or selling? Lin Shi walked to the counter. He unwrapped the black cloth bag and dumped the contents. Clatter. 3 blood-stained, defective tier, 1 beast cores, and 1 thick gold necklace hit the table. The one-eyed old man froze. He finally looked up, his single, cloudy eye lingering on the white porcelain mask for a few seconds before shifting to the items on the counter. The gold was poor quality, scrap pieces and a thick necklace covered in fresh teeth marks. This gold belongs to that fat guy from the Black Snake Gang, doesn't it? The old man gave me a playful, knowing look. Young man, you've got guts killing their people. He just stole this necklace yesterday. It hasn't even gotten warm in his pocket yet. The air in the shop turned ice cold. Back in the attic, my heart skipped a beat, but I forced myself to stay calm. This was the ghost market. They cared about profit, not grudges. If this old man tried to pull a fast one, I wouldn't mind letting Lin Shi kill again. Are you buying or not? Lin Shi's voice was raspy and cold. It sounded like it was echoing out of an abyss behind that mask. I'm buying. Of course, I'm buying. The old man grinned, revealing a row of yellow teeth. The rules of the ghost market say I don't ask about the source. But this stuff is hot. The Black Snake Gang is hunting people like rabid dogs right now. I have to drop the price by 20%. Fine, Lin Shi nodded. 4,500 Union coins. Cash. The old man slapped a stack of bills onto the counter. He leaned in, his voice testing the waters. You look like a new face. A lone wolf? Interested in some private work? Outside the city, there's. Before he could finish, Lin Shi's finger pressed down on a scrap steel plate on the counter. He didn't draw his sword. But in that heartbeat, the old man's good eye shrank to the size of a needle. A domineering, sharp aura flooded the shop. It wasn't just killing intent. It was a higher level of power, a talent suppression that felt like it could slice through the air itself. Under his gaze, the 2-centimeter-thick steel plate beneath Lin Shi's finger split apart like soft tofu. The cut was as smooth as a mirror. The old man gasped, cold sweat instantly soaking his back. He had spent decades in Silver City and seen countless awakeners. He'd seen strength types who could snap steel and fire types who could melt it. But he had never heard of someone who could make metal disintegrate just by releasing their aura. An A-class? Or maybe a rare mutation. The old man was terrified. Any thought of cheating or testing me vanished instantly. In this backwater city, even a B-class was a big shot. As for an S-class, he didn't even dare to dream it. Someone like that wouldn't come to a filthy market to sell scrap for a few $1,000s. He decided I must be a top-tier A-class genius from a major family out on a trial. The deal is done. Lin Shi withdrew his hand and swept the money off the table. His movements were efficient. I want a blade. Nothing fancy, just hard and fast. The old man's attitude shifted instantly. He went from casual to incredibly respectful. I understand. A master like you probably finds standard-issue weapons too light. He bent down and pulled a long black wooden box from a safe at the bottom of the counter. Inside lay a pitch-black straight blade. It had no handguard. The spine was perfectly straight, and the edge shimmered with a terrifying cold light. This is a Steel Slasher Type 3, leaked from the military years ago. It's infused with C-class beastbone powder and high-strength alloy. It's only an F-class peak weapon, but the hardness is top tier. It won't chip, even if you're hacking through Tier 1 monster bones. Lin Shi gripped the hilt. The gun-gold sword energy inside his body surged, flowing down his arm and into the blade. A faint, almost invisible golden line lit up along the black edge. It felt right. It was much better than a rusty iron bar. How much? It's usually 8,000. The old man wiped his sweat. But for you, let's call it 6,000. Just to make a friend. Lin Shi didn't argue. I combined the 4,500 I just earned with the cash I'd scavenged earlier. It was exactly 6,000. Back in the attic, my heart bled. This was every cent I had. But a good blade was the key to Lin Shi's power. I couldn't skimp on it. He slid the new sword into the cloth wrap on his back and turned to leave. But as his hand touched the door handle, he stopped. In the attic, I watched the monitor, my mind racing. Since old Jean thought I was some elite noble, I might as well use that connection. Old Jean, Lin Shi said, his back still turned. His voice was indifferent. Who has the best hands in Silver City? Hands. Old Jean blinked, confused. The kind of hands that can turn black into white. Lin Shi turned his head slightly. Those dark eyes stared through the mask, cold and piercing. I need a clean identity. One that can stand up to an investigation. Old Jean shuddered. He was an old fox. He understood immediately. A common thug would just buy a fake ID, but this young master wanted one that could pass a background check. That meant he was aiming for something high-level, the military, or maybe a top university. These noble kids often kept secret identities to handle their dirty work. I understand. Old Jean swallowed hard, his theory confirmed. He pulled a blank black business card from a hidden drawer and handed it over with both hands. For common trash, you just turn left outside. But for what you need, he lowered his voice. Go to Faceless Alley. Find the blind man, tell him old Jean sent you. He hesitated. But be warned. The blind man is eccentric. He's the real deal. But he might want more than just money for his trouble. Lin Shi caught the card between 2 fingers and vanished into the night. He navigated the narrow, greasy alleys until he reached a dilapidated shop with a sign for watch repairs. This was the place. Repairing a watch or repairing a life? A blind man wearing dark glasses asked. He didn't look up from the mechanical watch he was dismantling with a screwdriver. I'm buying an identity, Lin Shi said flatly. What tier? The cleanest. One that can pass an inquiry from the capital. The blind man's hands finally stopped. He slowly raised his head. Even behind the glasses, I felt him watching me. The capital? You've got a big mouth, kid. An identity like that isn't just about money. You need a tribute. He pulled a yellowed photo from his coat. It showed an old, rusted safe. 30 miles outside the city, in the Tier 1 forbidden zone of the abandoned heavy industry district. The place is crawling with armored iron hounds. I need you to go in there and bring back one thing. A red diary. The blind man's voice turned heavy and ancient. It's been there for 20 years. Bring me that diary, and I'll give you a seamless identity. Even the admissions board at Beidou Academy won't find a single flaw. In the attic, I stared at the photo, my brow furrowed. A Tier 1 forbidden zone? Armored iron hounds were true Tier 1 beasts. There might even be elite variants there. Their hides were so thick that normal bullets couldn't pierce them. But I had no choice. An S-class talent was powerful, but without a legal identity, I was nothing but a ghost. Lin Shi could never remain a rat in the sewers. If I wanted to reach the top, to stand in the light at Beidou Academy and claim a seat among the strongest, I had to take this risk. Wealth and power are found in danger. I accepted the deal. Lin Shi pocketed the photo and vanished into the rainy night. Back in my attic, I blew out the candle. I had 2 days before Gu Hanqing left Yin City. Before he disappeared, I needed to make sure Lin Shi had a name that could stand proudly by his side. 30 miles outside the city sat the abandoned heavy industry district. It was once the beating heart of the old era, but now it was a silent graveyard of steel. Acid rain lashed against the towering ruins of machinery, turning the runoff a rusty, blood-like red. A piercing howl echoed through the empty workshop. A dozen pairs of glowing green eyes flickered in the dark. Armored iron hounds. These were Tier 1 beasts mutated by heavy metal pollution, their fur hardened into jagged, metallic scales. In the center of the pack, Lin Shi stood perfectly still. He wore his white porcelain mask, gripping the steel slasher blade I had just bought. The black blade shimmered with a cold light under the flashes of lightning. From the attic, I analyzed the battlefield through our shared vision. 12 hounds. The leader was a king, a beast the size of a bull covered in a silver metallic sheen. It crouched atop a rusted tank, its crimson eyes locked onto my avatar. It was a peak Tier 1, nearly Tier 2. I needed to end this quickly. With a single thought, I sent Lin Shi forward. He moved like a bolt of black lightning, diving into the pack. I activated the S-class Gungold talent. The black blade was instantly shrouded in a blinding golden light. The first strike fell. An iron hound leaped at him, but the blade sliced through its reinforced skull like it was soft tofu. Blood sprayed, evaporating before it could even hit the ground. This was the raw power of an S-class talent. Even at Tier 1, Lin Shi could slaughter ordinary beasts like dogs. But after the 5th kill, the king moved. It became a silver blur, crashing through the rain with terrifying speed. Lin Shi barely had time to raise his blade in a block. The impact was deafening. The force sent him flying backward, smashing deep into a pile of scrap metal. In the attic, a sharp pain flared in my chest. I didn't flinch. I immediately dialed down the pain transmission. The steel slasher blade wasn't hard enough to tank a direct hit from a near Tier 2 beast. I looked at the weapon in Lin Shi's hand. The edge was already chipped. I needed a killing blow. Lin Shi stood up unsteadily. The king didn't give him a second to breathe. It lunged again, its jaws wide, the stench of rot filling the air. This time, I didn't let him dodge. I waited. When the beast was inches away, close enough to see the shredded meat stuck in its teeth, I made Lin Chi drop low. He slid across the oily ground directly beneath the king's belly. Now, he swung the blade upward with everything he had. The gung gold energy surged in an unstable burst. A loud crack echoed through the warehouse. It wasn't bone. It was the sword. My 6,000 coin blade snapped under the pressure of the S-class energy and the beast's metallic ribs. The broken half of the blade was stuck deep in the king's chest. We were weaponless, trapped under the beast, seconds away from being crushed into pulp. But my gaze remained cold. If I didn't have a sword, my hands would have to do. Lin Chi let go of the hilt and lunged for the broken shard wedged in the ribs. The jagged metal sliced his palms open, but I felt nothing. Die. He gripped the shard and twisted it with a violent, desperate strength. The golden sword energy exploded inside the king's body, turning its internal organs into a bloody slurry. The beast let out a final, agonizing shriek. Its massive body skidded across the floor and went still. The remaining hounds scattered into the darkness. Rain continued to fall. Lin Chi lay in the mud, breathing hard, his blood mixing with oil and beast gore. His right hand was a mess, but he still gripped that broken piece of steel. We had won. After a few minutes, he bandaged his hand and approached the rusted tank. Inside the cockpit, he found a safe that had been partially pried open. Nestled inside was a black metal cylinder. The black box. It had no writing, only a complex mechanical lock that had rusted shut. It was heavy. I wondered what was inside. A map? Secrets of the powerful? I quickly suppressed the curiosity. In the underground, secrets were often more lethal than bullets. I only wanted the identity. Lin Chi stuffed the box into his coat. He took a moment to saw off the king's head, proof of the kill and a trophy to sell. He looked at the shattered remains of his sword one last time. There was a flicker of regret. Rest in peace, old friend. He turned and disappeared into the pre-dawn gloom. This fight taught me a hard lesson. An S-class talent needed an S-class vessel. Ordinary steel could never keep up with a god. By 4 in the morning, the sky was still a dull, ashy gray. The acid rain felt eternal. Deep in Faceless Alley, the light in the watch shop flickered. The blind man sat at his workbench without his sunglasses. His milky, sightless eyes stared at the door. His hands, usually steady enough to move gears smaller than a grain of rice, were trembling. He was waiting. Footsteps approached. They were light but heavy with the sound of wet clothes. The blind man's nose twitched. His brow furrowed at the thick scent of blood and rust. The door creaked open. A drenched figure in purple-stained black clothes walked in. The white mask was cracked, revealing pale skin underneath. Without a word, Lin Chi tossed a heavy, dripping bag onto the workbench. The bag slumped open. The massive, silver-scaled head of the king rolled out, its red eyes staring directly at the old man. A peak tier 1. The tribute was paid. It's an armored ironhound king, I said. My voice was raspy, heavy with an exhaustion that seeped into my very bones. Despite the fatigue, I kept my back straight. I had to maintain the image. I tossed the heavy, dripping bag onto the workbench. The massive, silver-scaled head rolled out, its red eyes staring blankly at the old man. This was the extra tribute. Old Gene, the blind man, couldn't see, but his fingers trembled as they brushed over the kill. He felt the fatal puncture wound on the beast's skull. His face turned solemn. He knew what this meant. A grade. 1 awakener had killed a near grade, 2 king using nothing but a shattered blade. "Where is the item I asked for?" he asked, his voice low. I didn't answer with words. I pulled the heavy black metal cylinder from my coat and placed it next to the severed head. It was covered in grease and dried blood, but the complex mechanical lock was untouched. Back in my hidden attic, I watched the scene through Lin Chi's eyes, my heart hammering against my ribs. This was the most dangerous moment. If the blind man wanted to tie up loose ends or suspected I'd peeked at his secrets, this shop would turn into a slaughterhouse in seconds. The old man's shaking hands found the black box. He traced the lock, confirming the rust hadn't been disturbed. Only then did his tensed shoulders relax. Silence stretched for a full minute. Then, he took a deep breath. Suddenly, the air grew heavy. A massive, invisible wave of mental pressure locked onto me. "Did you look inside?" he hissed. The atmosphere froze. If my heart skipped a beat, or if I hesitated for a second, the hidden traps in this room would tear Lin Chi apart. I controlled Lin Chi's expression, looking at the old man through the cracks in my white mask. I let a flicker of professional disdain show in my eyes, the cold indifference of a killer. I can't read, I said flatly. I'm an illiterate who only knows how to kill. The employer pays, I do the work. As for what's inside, I let my killing intent and gung-gold energy flare up, sharp enough to practically slice the air. I don't give a damn. The blind man froze. His mental scan swept over me, searching for guilt, curiosity, or a lie. He found nothing. He couldn't have known the consciousness driving this body was miles away, leaving Lin Chi as nothing more than a hollow, emotionless vessel for slaughter. Fair enough, the old man muttered, a self-deprecating smile twitching on his lips. The crushing pressure vanished. The wolves who survive in tier 1 zones usually don't read much. Those with too much curiosity don't last 3 days in the wilderness. He shoved the black box into his robes with frantic speed, as if hiding evidence that could topple the entire city. The deal is done. He reached under a pile of scrap clock parts and tossed a brown paper envelope onto the bench. Here is your identity. It was meant for a dead man. Now it's yours. I grabbed the envelope and tore it open. Inside was a federal ID card and a background file so detailed it even listed childhood chickenpox. Name, Lin Chi. Age, 18. Origin, Settlement 73, wiped out by a beast tied 6 months ago. Status, Wandering Hunter, Sole Survivor. Talent, A-class metal manipulation. Back in the attic, a smirk played on my lips. It was perfect. Settlement 73 was a wasteland now. There was no one left to verify a thing. The A-class talent explained my combat power while hiding the true lethality of my S-class gun gold. In a city like this, A-class was impressive, but not so rare that the government would force me into service. Thanks, I said, turning to leave. Wait, the blind man called out. He pointed to the Hound King's head. You can't carry that around. It's too flashy. And I see your blade is broken. I stopped, glancing at the jagged hilt on my back. Leave it with me, he said, tossing a black metal card onto the table. It bore the mark of the Big Dipper. The king's skull is top-tier forging material. I'll use it for a new hilt and combine it with your broken alloy blade. If you ever go to the capital, take this card to the Beidou station. I'll have someone forge you a sword that can actually kill. He paused, his sightless eyes boring into me. Consider it hush money. Forget the black box ever existed. Deal. I stepped out of Faceless Alley. The rain had finally stopped, and the horizon was turning a pale, ashy gray. Dawn was coming. I pulled off the shattered porcelain mask and tossed it into a gutter, revealing my pale, cold face. I ran a thumb over the name on my new ID. In the attic, I pulled back the curtains and watched the city wake up. From today on, you are Lin Chi, I whispered to the empty room. The genius hunter who crawled out of a pile of corpses. And I'm still just Li Yabai, the useless D-class failure. I looked at the calendar. Tomorrow was the day Gu Hanqing would leave the city. It was the day our paths would split, and the real game would begin. See you in the capital, I said, raising a glass of water to the rising sun, toasting an invisible comrade. The rain outside the attic seemed like it would never truly end. I scrubbed 2 old wooden chairs and pulled out a half-finished pack of compressed biscuits. It was a pathetic meal, but it was all I had for our final night. A knock came at the door. Soft, hesitant. I took a breath and checked my reflection in a cracked mirror. I forced a lazy, slouching grin onto my face and let my eyes go dull. This was my best mask. Come in. It's unlocked. The door opened. Gu Hanqing stepped in, closing her elegant transparent umbrella. She wasn't in her school uniform today. She wore a white cashmere coat and a bright red scarf. In this moldy, cramped attic, she looked like an angel who had wandered onto the wrong set. Her expression was cold, but her eyes were rimmed with red. She slammed a silver metal suitcase onto the rickety table. Eat, she said, sitting down. Her eyes landed on my dry biscuits, and her brow furrowed in anger. Hey, the rich girl arrived, I said with a cheeky grin, taking a bite of a biscuit. Can't help it. D classes don't get much of a subsidy. This fills the stomach. She stared at me, her face twisting. Suddenly, she reached out and slapped the biscuit right out of my hand. Do you really have to be like this? Her voice was trembling. All that suppressed emotion finally boiled over. You weren't like this before, Li Yabai. Gu Hanqing stood up. Her beautiful eyes were filled with disappointment and raw pain. When you were 8 years old, the Li family threw you out, she said, her voice cracking. You had a high fever, but you still practiced your punches in the snow. You told me you'd prove them wrong. When we were 12, we ran into that mutated rat. You hadn't even awakened yet, but you charged at it with a brick and cracked its skull open. You were covered in blood, but your eyes looked like a wolf's. She pointed at me, her fingers shaking. I just sat there with a crooked, indifferent smirk. Back then, even without talent, you were someone I looked up to, she sobbed. But look at you now. You awakened a D-class grade and just gave up? You're content to rot in this attic, living off handouts? You've changed. You're a stranger to me. Silence swallowed the room. Only the rain hammered against the tin roof. I kept my head down. Under the table, my hands gripped my pant legs so hard my nails dug into my flesh. I wanted to tell her that the boy from the snow was still here. I wanted to tell her the wolf wasn't dead. It had grown fangs and was ready to bite a hole in the sky. But I couldn't. She was going to the capital. That was Li family territory. If they found out I had an SSS class talent, they would crush us both. To keep her safe, I had to make her hate me. I had to be the worthless trash she couldn't wait to leave behind. People change, Miss Gu, I said. I looked up and let that disgusting, greedy smile slide back onto my face. I patted the metal suitcase. Besides, what's the point of trying? You're S-class. I'm D-class. That's fate. So what's in here? My breakup fee. The light in her eyes died. It's medicine, she whispered. She opened the case. A cold mist rolled out, revealing 20 glass vials of pale blue liquid. Primary psionic refinement fluid. Each one cost 20,000 coins. For a normal family, this was an unthinkable luxury. Beside the vials lay a black gold bank card. There's 500,000 in there, she said, her voice turning cold and exhausted. It's every cent I've saved since I was a kid. It's almost impossible for a D-class to break through the first rank over the summer, but I don't believe in fate. This is enough to force your body to level up. If you reach the first rank, you can get into Inching University. Even a desk job in the city guard is better than digging coal in the mines. She pushed the case toward me. This is the last time I'll help you, Li Yabai. If you have any self-respect left, take this and stand up like a man. Stop playing the fool. I looked at the potions. I knew what this was. This was her dowry. This was money she had scraped together while living in her own cold, uncaring family. My heart felt like it was being shredded. I forced a laugh and hugged the box like a starving miser. Wow, I'm rich, I shouted, my eyes gleaming with fake greed. 500,000 plus these meds? Haha, Gu Hanqing, you're a real pal. With this, I can breeze through 4 years of college. Maybe I'll buy a small house and find a plain wife to settle down with. Li Yabai, she was shaking with rage. Seeing me like this, ambitionless and obsessed with money, finally killed her last hope. The boy in the snow was truly dead to her. Take care of yourself, she spat. She turned and ran. She didn't want me to see her cry. Safe travels, rich girl. I yelled after her, waving dismissively. Don't forget to call me from the capital. The heavy security door slammed shut. Her white coat vanished into the rain. The moment she was gone, my smile vanished. The room turned ice cold. I reached out and touched the metal case, still warm from her hands. Silly girl, I whispered. D-class is hard to break through. But who told you I was only D-class? I picked up a vial. A normal D-class would take 3 days to absorb this, with less than 10% efficiency. But I was different. My SSS class talent, the avatar of gods, was a greedy black hole. I needed to be strong so she could stand tall in the capital. I needed to be strong so she would never have to bow to her family for my sake. I tilted my head back and swallowed the 20,000 coin potion in one gulp. Boom. The power exploded inside me like molten lava. For a mortal body, the pain was like being flayed alive. I didn't even flinch. I'm coming for you, I muttered, staring toward the capital. And I won't just catch up. I'll be waiting for you at the top of the world. That night, Gu Hanqing cried, and I burned with pain. The gears of fate began to turn. The next morning, Incheon railway station was split in two. On the left, the VIP area, white domes, red carpets, and classical music. On the right, the civilian freight area, filth, cheap tobacco, and the stench of sweat and oil. At 10 o'clock, the VIP area was packed. The city lord and the school principal were hovering around Gu Hanxing like servants, their faces plastered with smiles. "Student Gu, please take care in the capital," the principal said, his face trembling with excitement. "You are our pride, our first S-class in 20 years." Gu Hanxing nodded politely, but her eyes were searching the crowd. She looked at the security gates, the corners, every person in ragged clothes. 5 minutes passed. 10. The slouching figure she was looking for never appeared. "Liar," she whispered, her knuckles turning white as she gripped her boarding pass. He had taken her money. He had promised to stay in touch. And yet, he didn't even have the courage to say goodbye. Was he ashamed? Or did he just not care? The train whistle shrieked. Gu Hanxing took a deep breath and buried her disappointment deep in her heart. Her gaze turned cold and sharp again. If I chose to rot in the mud, she wouldn't look back. If I can't catch up to her now, I'll just fly to a height where she can't even see me. When that day comes, maybe I'll be the one reaching down to pull her out of whatever hole she's in. She turned around. Amidst the cheers and flattery of the city's powerful elite, she stepped onto that silver train heading for the clouds. At the same time, on the other side of a single wall, I was in the freight zone. "Stop pushing. You trying to get reincarnated early?" "Damn it. Who stepped on my foot? Are you blind?" There were no red carpets here. There was only shoving, cursing, and the chaotic violence of people fighting for a window seat. A green-skinned train sat by the platform, its body mottled with rust and its windows caked in thick dust. This was the Black Iron, a slow train meant for transporting or low-level conscripts and wandering mercenaries to the capital. I carried a long cloth bag on my back. Inside was a rusted iron bar I used as a decoy. My real weapon, the broken blade, was hidden against my chest. I blended into the crowd, silent. I wore a gray windbreaker I'd scavenged from a street stall, my hood pulled low. I looked like a nobody. "Hey, newbie, get lost. This is my spot." A mercenary with a face full of scars and a mountain-splitting axe on his back shoved toward me. He wanted to knock the skinny kid, me, away from the door. I didn't say a word. I just slightly raised my eyelids. There was no emotion in my dark pupils, only a faint, razor-sharp chill that pierced straight into the man's marrow. It was the aura of someone who had just slaughtered a near-tier 2 beast king. It was the smell of blood. The mercenary froze. He looked like he'd been pinned by a venomous snake. Cold sweat drenched his back instantly. He took 2 steps back, nearly tripping over his own feet. Brother, you first. After you." I withdrew my gaze and stepped onto the mud-covered stairs, entering a carriage that reeked of stale sweat. I found a corner by the window and sat down, using my bag to shield my body. Through the grime on the glass, I could see the neighboring platform. There, the Beidou Express, white as silver, was starting to move. It was fast and smooth. Through its pristine floor-to-ceiling windows, I caught a glimpse of a white figure sitting in first class, staring blankly outside. She looked beautiful, but she looked very far away. I looked down and pulled out a brand-new ID card from my jacket. Lin Chi. Survivor of Settlement 73. "Time to go," I whispered to myself. The green train shuddered violently. It let out a heavy, metallic wheeze, spat a cloud of black smoke, and slowly began to roll. 2 trains. One towards the light, one into the night. They started on parallel tracks, heading for the same destination. The capital, a place that ate people alive. 3 kilometers away, on the top floor of the Incheon clock tower, the wind was howling. It whipped at clothes and brought a high-altitude chill. Li Yebai stood at the edge of the roof, holding a black umbrella. Below him was the gray sprawl of the city. At the horizon, the 2 trains looked like tiny snakes crawling out of the city before vanishing into the gray fog. He hadn't gone to the station. As a D-class failure, he had no right to stand next to an S-class. It would only bring ridicule or alert the Li family's spies to his presence. "Safe travels, eldest miss," Li Yebai said softly, watching the white train disappear. Then he looked at the train belching black smoke. And good luck to you, too. Lin Chi. He closed his umbrella. The rain had stopped, but his war was just beginning. He turned back to the empty city. Gu Hanqing was gone. Lin Chi was gone. Insheng was now his backyard. He touched the black card in his pocket, the one holding 500,000 coins. A look of fanaticism and ruthlessness crossed his face. 2 months. There were exactly 60 days before the academy started. Before they reached the finish line, I'm going to shatter this D-class body and forge it into something new. He headed downstairs. His first stop wasn't home. It was the largest underground potion shop in the city. This long holiday was going to be madness. Time is the most honest and expensive currency in the world. For an S-class genius like Gu Hanqing, a 2-month break was a trip to the clouds, paved by family resources and top-tier mentors. For her, breaking through levels was as easy as drinking water. But for the D-class Li Yebai and the wild Lin Chi, these 2 months were a desperate gamble with their lives on the table. Week 1. The underground fighting pits of the capital's 13th district. The capital's glamour only belonged to the inner 3 districts. In the chaos of the 13th district, where neon lights couldn't reach, there were only rats, greedy gamblers, and outlaws. Inside the Black Dragon underground arena, the air was thick with blood, cheap cigarettes, and raw testosterone. Around the iron cage, hundreds of gamblers waved stacks of cash, roaring like beasts. Tear him apart. Kill the kid, who only knows how to hide. Inside the cage, I stood shirtless. My skin was covered in deep purple bruises. I wore a jagged iron half-mask and held a standard-issue short blade provided by the arena. My opponent was a 2-meter-tall giant with muscles like granite. Codename, The Butcher. Level, Tier 1, Early Stage. Talent, Strength Enhancement. Die, little rat. The Butcher roared. His massive fist swung down with a whistle, strong enough to punch through steel plate. I didn't block it. My eyes were cold as ice. My body twisted at an impossible angle, sliding past his arm. I was suppressing my S-class Gungold sword chi to an A-class output. I didn't need a sword to kill. As long as there was metal, it was an extension of my body. My fingers lightly brushed the metal bracer on the butcher's arm. The reinforced steel, meant for defense, suddenly seemed to come alive. A sharp spike snapped inward from the interior of the bracer. Squish. The spike buried itself deep into the butcher's main artery. He screamed, clutching his spurting arm. I didn't hesitate. While he was stunned, my notched blade drew a black arc through the air, precisely severing his Achilles tendon. The giant collapsed. The arena went silent for a heartbeat before erupting into deafening cheers. I stood in the pool of blood, glanced at my twitching opponent, and walked out of the cage. Here's your share. 30,000, after the house cut. The manager threw a stack of blood-stained bills at me. He looked at me with a hint of fear. Kid, you've won 7 in a row this week. The odds are too low now. Next week, I'm putting you against a Tier 1 middle stage. I took the money and said nothing, vanishing into the dark tunnel. During this holiday, I was the mute reaper of the Black Dragon arena. In the mud and blood, I was grinding my combat experience, sharpening my S-class chi until it was restrained, hidden, and lethal. Week 3. Insheng. The attic. Unlike the noise of the capital, the attic was deathly silent. A dozen empty blue glass vials littered the floor, hundreds of thousands of coins worth of spiritual energy refining fluid. Li Yebai sat cross-legged on the floor, shirtless. His skin was bright red, like a boiled shrimp. Sweat mixed with black impurities from his body, forming a murky puddle beneath him. It hurt. It felt like every vein in his body was snapping. A D-class talent's meridians were too narrow to handle such a violent influx of energy. Every dose of the potion felt like fire. It felt like someone was pouring molten mercury directly into my capillaries. I hacked up a mouthful of black blood, my entire body convulsing on the attic floor. A normal person would have stopped, but I forced my eyes toward the wall. I looked at the sticky note Gu Hanqing had left for me. Live well, it said. Living wasn't enough. I wiped the blood from my chin, a manic obsession burning in my eyes. I had to get stronger. With a trembling hand, I grabbed the 15th vial of spiritual fluid. My SSS class talent, the avatar of gods, roared to life inside me. It acted like an invisible, giant hand, forcibly crushing the violent energy and stuffing it into every single cell of my body. If my talent wasn't enough, I'd fill the gap with my life. If my meridians were too narrow, I'd stretch them until they burst, then forge them anew. I swallowed the 15th potion. I let out a low groan and sank back into a meditative trance. Week 7. A rainy night in the capital. As Lin Shi, I walked into a vintage weapon shop sporting a Big Dipper sign. I was wearing a black hoodie, my face hidden. When I produced the black card the blind man had given me, the clerk's face went pale. He bowed and led me to a private back room. "The master prepared this for you," he whispered, presenting a long, narrow black box. Inside lay a matte black blade. It didn't reflect a single ray of light. The hilt was crafted from the skull of the Iron Hound King I had slain. It felt warm, like jade, but pulsed with a lingering ferocity. This was my custom weapon, the fish-hidden blade. It was a grade 1 peak weapon, currently incomplete, but forged with memory metal. It was designed to perfectly channel my S-class Gungold energy and could even repair itself. I gripped the hilt. A hum vibrated through my arm. It felt like an extension of my own body. A good blade. I sheathed it, my aura now completely restrained. I stood there like a hidden edge, sharp and silent. I had reached the middle stage of Tier 1. Week 8. The final day of the holiday in Inching. The setting sun dyed the attic blood red. I looked at the 20 empty vials on the table. 500,000 coins worth of resources, gone. It was a ruinous way to train, the kind of spending that would make even a wealthy family flinch. I opened my eyes. My body was still lean, but my muscles were now defined and packed with explosive power. A faint glow pulsed beneath my skin before vanishing. I exhaled a breath so concentrated it hit the air with a soft pop. Something snapped inside me. A lock had broken. A stream of pure, refined spiritual energy gathered in my core. It was the mark of an official awakener. Tier 1, initial stage. I had done it. Using a trash Tier D-class body, I had shattered the limits of a normal human in just 2 months. It was a miracle built on the back of Gu Hanqing's entire dowry. I stood up and grabbed my admission letter for Inching University. At that same moment, miles away in the capital, Lin Shi pulled out a gold-leafed invitation to the elite Beidou Academy. Both versions of myself looked in the same direction at once. The game was finally starting. Wait for me, Hanqing. As for the idiots who look down on the D class, I'm about to give them a lesson they'll never forget. September 1st, opening day. The weather in this world felt as divided as the social classes. In the capital, the sky was a brilliant, piercing blue. In Incheng, it was raining, the air smelling of mold and ash. The Beidou War Academy was a palace in the clouds. Its gates were 30 meters high, made of a silver alloy shaped like 2 crossing giant swords. Luxury hovercars and heavy military off-roaders crowded the entrance. Even the lowest-ranked students here wore designer combat gear and had servants carrying their luggage. This was a sanctuary for geniuses and a coliseum for monsters. A beat-up old taxi pulled up to the gate. I stepped out, wearing cheap combat boots and a faded canvas bag. The fish-hidden blade was wrapped in black cloth on his back. I looked like a stray wolf that had wandered into a flock of peacocks, smelling of rust and gunpowder. Who's that? Did he get lost? Look at those clothes. Probably some scholarship kid from the slums. In the countryside, he might be a genius. Here, he's nothing. I ignored the whispers. I tilted my hood back and stared at the gate. My eyes were cold. This was where Gu Hanqing would spend the next 4 years. It was too noisy. Halt! A roar exploded across the plaza. A middle-aged man in a black instructor's uniform slammed down from the sky, cracking the marble floor beneath his feet. He was a Tier 3 peak powerhouse. "I am your chief instructor, Lei Meng," his voice boomed. "Beidou doesn't need trash or hothouse flowers. If you want to walk through these gates, prove you have the right to stand in my presence." He released a terrifying wave of spiritual pressure. It hit the plaza like a falling mountain. For students who had only been awakened for 2 months, this was a total suppression of power. Groans filled the air. Highborn heirs turned pale, their legs buckling. Most of the B-class students collapsed instantly. The A-class students held on, their faces turning beet red as they were forced to stoop. Only a handful of S-class students remained standing, though their expressions were grim. Lei Ming scanned the crowd with disdain. Every year, you get weaker. Then, his eyes stopped on a corner of the crowd. There stood a boy in a cheap windbreaker, hands in his pockets, yawning. The pressure that was suffocating everyone else didn't even ruffle his clothes. It was like a light breeze to him. I looked at the instructor with total indifference. Was he joking? My soul was the SSS class avatar of gods. I was the lord of 10,000 gods. His pressure meant nothing to me. The pressure of a tier 3 mortal was a joke. It was like an ant trying to intimidate a dragon. If I weren't worried about blowing my cover, I would have released a sliver of my own aura to see if the instructor's heart could take it. Lei Ming withdrew his pressure. In a blur of movement, he appeared right in front of me. His fierce, scarred face was inches from my nose. "Kid, what's your name?" he growled. "Lin Chi," I said. My voice was flat, showing no emotion. "Rank, A class, metal mutation." That was what my forged document said. Lei Ming narrowed his eyes, studying me. He seemed to be sniffing the air around me, sensing the faint, lingering scent of blood that never truly left my skin. "You've killed people," he noted. I lifted my gaze. Deep in my pupils lay a sea of corpses and mountains of bone. "I've killed dogs too. Which ones do you want to hear about?" The plaza went silent. The other students looked at me like I was a madman. Nobody talked to the living Yama like that. Lei Ming froze for a second, then his mouth split open into a wide, toothy grin. He started laughing. "Haha, good, very good." He slammed a heavy hand onto my shoulder. A normal person would have been crushed, but I didn't flinch. "You're arrogant enough. I like it. Don't bother reporting to the regular classes. Take this to the Special Operations Department, Earth Spirit class. It's full of lunatics. You'll fit right in." I took the black badge he handed me. I didn't waste words. I grabbed my bag and walked through the gates, leaving a crowd of stunned prodigies behind me. At the same time, across the country in Incheon, the sky was drizzling. The gates of Incheon Comprehensive University looked pathetic. The paint was peeling off the iron bars, and the walls were covered in cheap flyers for cram courses. In the security booth, an old man with a Tier 1 cultivation level had his feet up, listening to the radio. This was a paradise for D-class awakeners and C-class slackers. There was no competition here. No pressure tests. Just the peaceful aroma of people waiting to die of old age. I, the real me, Li Yabai, walked on a campus wearing a faded tracksuit and chewing gum. I looked like any other loser. I reached the registration desk where a female teacher with thick glasses was working. Name: Li Yabai. Talent rank: D-class. The teacher sighed and stamped my papers without looking up. D-class goes to logistics or civil engineering. At least you can carry bricks for a construction bureau after you graduate. Actually, teacher, I pointed to a tiny line of text at the bottom of the brochure. I want to enroll in this one. She looked where I was pointing and froze. Ancient text restoration and library management? You want this? She looked at me like I was an idiot. Student, nobody has signed up for this major in 3 years. The books are covered in dust. There are no cultivation resources allocated to it. You'll be a glorified doorman when you graduate. I know, I said, shrugging. But my health isn't great. I don't like fighting. Besides, I just really like books. She started to argue, but then the energy detector on her desk flashed. Current realm, Tier 1, early stage. The teacher jumped up, nearly losing her glasses. What? You broke through to Tier 1? In just 2 months. The students nearby stopped filling out their forms to stare. For a D-class to hit Tier 1 during the summer break required insane willpower. It was the kind of thing people died trying to achieve. I got lucky, I said, rubbing my chest with a fake look of lingering fear. My family bought some medicine. I almost died drinking it. That's why I'm telling you. Teacher, cultivation is too painful for me. Books are safer. She looked at me with pity. She saw a hard-working kid who had pushed himself so hard he'd burned out. Fine, she said, stamping the red ink. But be warned, the library is on the 3rd basement level. It's damp and dark. Don't stay down there too long. Thanks, teacher. I took my admission notice and headed toward the vine-covered library at the edge of campus. Only I knew the truth. That basement held every historical record from before Incheon was founded. It was the closest place to the truth behind the gray mist. More importantly, it was deserted. It was the perfect place for my main body to sit idle while I focused my entire consciousness on controlling my hourglass avatar in the capital. I pushed open the heavy oak doors. The smell of old paper and dust hit me. My harmless smile faded. I walked to the back, tossed my student ID on the desk, and snapped my fingers. The gray mist space descended. My left, I saw the bloodthirsty atmosphere of the special ops class in the capital. My right, I saw the silent depths of the ancient library. I sat in a dusty chair and picked up a yellowed book titled The Chronicles of Ancient. Dual threat operation, I whispered. Begin. 10 minutes later, inside the Alpha Hall of the Beidou Special Ops building, the air smelled of expensive incense. This wasn't a school, it was a playground for the elite. The classroom was already divided by social class. The back rows were packed with commoner geniuses from the base cities. Even though they were A or B class, they barely dared to breathe around the highborns. The front 2 rows were the golden seats. On the left sat Wang Lei, a scion of the Wang family. He wore a sophisticated mechanical exoskeleton on his right arm, pulsing with red spiritual fluid. He was showing off his furnace smasher arm, bragging that he could punch through tank armor. On the right sat Lin Dong from the main Lin family branch. He had no tech, but his Tier 1 peak aura was like a physical wall. The middle seat, the best one, was empty. That belonged to Gu Hanqing. Nobody dared touch it. The soundproof doors creaked open. My avatar, Lin Qi, walked in. I was in semi-autonomous mode, my eyes slightly hollow as I processed environmental data. I didn't care about the mocking stares. I scanned the room and walked toward an empty window seat in the 3rd row, the edge of the noble circle. Just as I reached for the chair, a heavy alloy combat boot slammed onto the seat's frame. Wang Lei turned his head, chewing his gum. His mechanical arm hummed. Who said you could sit here? I stopped and looked up mechanically. Move. Wang Lei sneered. His spiritual pressure exploded, making the air hot. B-class talent, burst flame. The air in this section is expensive, he mocked. A poor ghost like you, crawling out of a pile of corpses, can't afford to breathe it. The room erupted in laughter. Wang Lei kicked out, sending the chair flying across the room until it smashed against the wall. Get to the back and stand, he spat. That's where the stray dogs belong. In the dim, flickering light of the Yinxing University Library's 3rd basement, I snapped my book shut. Stray dog. I let a cold smile slip onto my face. My eyes sharpened. If Wang Lei wanted to call me a stray dog, I'd show him exactly how much a stray's bite could hurt. I snapped my fingers, sending my consciousness surging across the distance. Back in the Beidou Academy classroom, the change was instantaneous. My avatar, Lin Qi, had been standing there with hollow, wooden eyes. Suddenly, his pupils contracted. His entire aura shifted. A second ago, he was a cold, lifeless stone. Now he was a jagged, unsheathed blade. I looked down. I saw the wad of gum Wang Lei had spat onto my boot. Then I moved. I reached into my pocket and pulled out a simple, cheap metal pen. My voice was low, carrying a chill that seemed to freeze the air. Since you don't want me to sit in the chair, you can be the desk. You're dead, Wang Lei roared. Driven by the pampered instincts of a noble scion, he lashed out. The exoskeleton on his right arm overloaded instantly, glowing with a violent red light. Fueled by his B-class burst flame talent, he threw a punch aimed straight for my face. It was a heavy, devastating blow, strong enough to shatter solid rock. But through the eyes of my avatar, controlled by my true consciousness, the move was agonizingly slow. I activated my S-class Gungold talent, but in a micro-precision mode. On my retinas, Wang Lei's invincible mechanical arm began to deconstruct. I saw the gears, the hydraulic rods, and the drive shafts. Right inside the elbow, a tiny hydraulic valve the size of a grain of rice glowed red. That was the structural weak point. The pen in my hand hummed, coated in an invisible layer of golden light. I didn't back away. I stepped forward, tilting my body just enough to let the flaming fist graze past my ear. My hand shot out like a surgeon's scalpel. The tip of the pen slid into the gap of the precision joint without a hint of resistance. I jammed it, twisted and tore. A sickening sound of grinding metal echoed through the room. Wang Lei's aggressive mechanical arm froze midair. The internal drive shaft snapped, erupting in a cloud of black smoke and jagged electrical sparks. What? Wang Lei's eyes widened in pure shock. Before he could process the failure, my left hand slammed onto the back of his head. Kneel. There was a massive bang. I buried Wang Lei's head into the hard alloy desk. The reinforced surface actually dented under the impact. Blood sprayed across the golden seats. Wang Lei let out a high-pitched, pig-like scream. He tried to struggle, but his broken mechanical arm was now a 100-pound anchor pinning him down. I kept his head pressed to the desk with one hand. With the other, I twirled the metal pin between my fingers. I stabbed downward. The pin buried itself deep into the alloy table, less than a centimeter from his carotid artery. Don't move, I said, my voice as flat as still water. If you move again, the neck is next. The screaming stopped instantly. Wang Lei went rigid, too terrified to even breathe. The room fell into a deathly silence. Even Lin Dong, the strongest student there, snapped his eyes open. He stared at the hand holding the pen, his expression filled with newfound wariness. One move, I had destroyed a top-tier piece of military hardware with a common pen. That wasn't just strength, it was a terrifying insight into mechanical structures. This guy is a lunatic, the students in the back whispered, swallowing hard. I ignored them. I sat down right on the edge of Wang Lei's desk and rested my legs on his smoking mechanical arm. At that moment, I withdrew my primary consciousness. Lin Shi's eyes lost their sharp edge, returning to the guarded, lonely coldness of a lone wolf. He opened his bag and pulled out a textbook as if he hadn't just nearly killed a classmate. 3 minutes later, a pressure as heavy as a mountain descended on the classroom. The air near the podium twisted, and a man built like a steel tower appeared. This was Raymond, the chief instructor of the Special Combat Department and a Tier 3 peak powerhouse. His eyes scanned the room, lingering for a second on the bloody Wang Lei, then on me sitting on the desk. When he saw the precisely mangled mechanical arm, a savage, satisfied grin spread across his scarred face. Good. Raymond's voice boomed like thunder. The special combat class doesn't need hothouse flowers or trash who only rely on equipment. Since the rules of the front row are broken, we'll set new ones. From now on, the one with the biggest fist sits down. The ones with small fists, you stand. Now class starts. Back in the ancient university library, I let out a breath. If the academy in the capital was a burning furnace, this basement was a dry, deep well. Upstairs, students were studying for exams or wasting time. Down here, in the restricted archives, it smelled of suffocating mold and old paper. I was dressed in gray work clothes, wearing a mask and white gloves. To the world, I was Li Yebai, a Tier 1 weakling, a bookworm, and a poor work-study student. In reality, this was my absolute safe house. The situation at the academy is stabilized for now, I muttered, tossing my duster aside. My lazy expression vanished, replaced by surgical calm. That 3-minute fight had established Lin Shi's reputation, but it had also tested my limits. Projecting my consciousness increased my avatar's reaction speed by 30%, but it drained my mental energy. My head was throbbing. Now that I had status, I needed money. The ray mirror blade Lin Shi held was a growth-type weapon, but it was just a level 1 base. To evolve it, I needed rare metals. I couldn't afford to buy them. I had to steal them. I pulled open a rusty drawer labeled Top Secret, abandoned 20 years ago. A pile of yellowed blueprints and documents spilled out. These were the Inxing Geological Survey records from 20 years ago. I sat on a 3-legged chair and flipped through them. My S-class soul gave me a photographic memory. The dry data transformed into a 3D map in my mind. Half an hour later, my finger stopped on a hand-drawn map of a mining area. The target was the abandoned Sector 9 in northern Inxing. According to the records, the Wang Heavy Industry Group had been developing the site when an unexplained rat tide broke out. The beast level was rated Tier 1, but the Wang family suffered heavy losses and pulled out, claiming the resources were exhausted. Resources exhausted? I looked at the red annotation and felt a sarcastic smile tugging at my lips. I pulled out another file, data I had hacked from the Inxing Seismological Bureau. I compared the two. If those mines were truly empty, the seismic readings wouldn't look like this. The Wang family wasn't running away from a disaster. They were hiding something. Something didn't add up. Why had the underground magnetic field in Sector 9 continued to strengthen by 3% every year for 2 decades after the Wang family left? I traced my finger over the old evacuation route on the map. The Wang family had abandoned heavy mining machinery worth 30 million coins. They hadn't even bothered to remove the core drill bits. This wasn't a strategic retreat, it was a frantic escape. Or perhaps, it was a deliberate move to turn the area into a forbidden zone to hide a secret. My eyes lit up as I cross-referenced the data with a rare metal encyclopedia. Only one material fit this specific magnetic signature, star-pattern steel. It was the core material for high-level alloy weapons. A single gram cost 5,000 federal coins, and even if you had the money, it was almost impossible to find on the open market. The truth was staring me in the face. 20 years ago, the Wang family must have struck a secondary vein of star-pattern steel. They likely disturbed a high-level beast guarding the ore, something far more dangerous than a simple rat tide. To keep the secret for themselves, or perhaps to use the beast for experiments, they faked the disaster and walled the place off as their private backyard. The Wang family, I muttered. I thought of Wang lay back in the capital, his arrogance, and the mechanical arm I had trashed. They loved using superior equipment to crush people. Fine. I would use their own hidden mind to feed my blade. I closed the file, wiped my tracks, and locked the drawer. I focused my mind, establishing a mental link with my avatar, Lin Chi, back in the capital. Inside the Beidou Academy dorms, Lin Chi stopped polishing his long blade. For a split second, his cold eyes flashed with the sharp intelligence of my true self. The command was received. Target, Sector 9, Northern Yinshan. Objective, infiltrate the Wang family's lockdown zone, seize the star-pattern steel, and make the Wangs bleed. Lin Chi sheathed his sword. To travel that far from campus without raising eyebrows, I needed a legal excuse. I quickly scanned the Academy's mission system and found an obscure D-rank task, clearing rothounds from the outskirts of Sector 9. The client was Wang Security, a subsidiary of the very family I was targeting. The pay was 5,000 coins and 1 academic credit. A note at the bottom warned, * clear the perimeter only. Entering the deep mines is strictly prohibited. The thief is crying thief, I sneered through Lin Chi's lips. I clicked accept. The Wang family had no idea that the cannon fodder they were hiring to clean up their trash was actually a wolf coming for their throat. Back in the Yinxing library, I stretched and took off my mask, revealing my harmless, youthful face. It was raining again. I stared at the gray sky and whispered to myself, Wang Lei's debt is settled. Now, let's settle the score for what your family did to my hometown 20 years ago. I flipped the light switch, leaving the basement in total darkness. At the North Capital outpost, the massive alloy gates groaned open. Beyond lay a wasteland of gray dust and acid rain. This was the edge of civilization. A heavy transport truck from Wang Security pulled up, dropping off a group of mercenaries and students. Sign here, a foreman shouted through a megaphone. Stay on the perimeter. If you enter the core mining area, you're on your own. We won't come for your bodies. Lin Chi pulled his tactical cap low. He swiped his ID card, registered as survivor number 73, and blended into the crowd. Wearing a plain black windbreaker with his blade wrapped in cloth, he vanished into the shadows of the ruins like a drop of water in the ocean. The outskirts were a graveyard of collapsed malls and shattered glass. A few rothounds, their fur matted with green bile, were gnawing on old bones. They were late-stage spirit-not beasts, venomous and prone to hunting in packs. Lin Chi moved past them with the silence of a cat. One hound caught a scent and raised its head to bark. Before a sound could escape, a thin black line flashed through the air. Lin Chi didn't even slow down. Behind him, the hound's head slid off its neck in a perfect, mirror-smooth cut. It was too weak. I didn't even have him draw his sword. He just flicked a utility blade hidden in his sleeve. For an awakened at the midpoint of Tier 1, these perimeter mobs were a waste of time. The scenery changed as he reached the core lockdown zone. High-voltage fences and warning signs lined the perimeter, Wang Heavy Industry Private Zone. Through the wire, I saw massive cranes operating under the glare of searchlights. Lin Chi climbed a collapsed bell tower to get a better view. They weren't mining coal. The soldiers were moving massive metal cages. Inside weren't oars, but living, breathing monsters, some even in a tier 1 berserk state. They were using the abandoned mine as a cover for bioweapon experiments. Suddenly, a patrol squad headed toward the tower. The leader was Wang Hu, a security captain with a C-class strength talent and a tier 1 peak cultivation. He was armed with a mass-produced Gauss rifle. Damn it, Wang Hu spat, his rifle glowing with blue energy. More mercenaries trying to sneak in for scraps. Orders are clear. If you see a new face, kill them. No warnings. The 3-man squad fanned out, closing in on the tower. Lin Shi looked at the ray mirror blade on his back. The weapon trembled, let out a low hum, sensing the mountain of star-patterned steel ahead. It was hungry. Since you say it's a forbidden zone. Lin Shi pulled on a black half-mask, leaving only his cold, predatory eyes visible. Then nobody will hear you scream.